complexity and the historicity of power differential surfaces in the study methods and reflects in two interlinked instances. The first concerns the process of obtaining consent. Participants are seldom given the time to consider whether they want to take part in the research. Information sheets contain jargon and explain procedures with which the most vulnerable participants, meaning the very ones we ought to protect, might not be familiar. This is a sign that the researchers deem of minor importance the participants' right to question, critique, and fully understand the study. In the second instance, I see disregard of context and of the positionality of the researcher and the prospective participants and how this affects the procedure of acquiring consent. How many of our research participants feel the pressure of our urban upbringing or the names of the powerful institutions that support the study, or even just our pen's papership and note-taking? In a different context, with different actors, the same characteristics could foster a sense of security and reliability, but this is not a reaction that can be taken for granted. I look forward to the day when our scientists from all disciplinary backgrounds will be trained the responsibility of addressing these delicate balances. Thank you.
Okay, great. So hello, everybody, and I hope you're enjoying all the different components of the GLOW conference that's happening at the moment. So my name is Clara Burton, and I am a Programme Manager at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. And over to you, Primrose.
Hello, everybody. I'm Primrose Matamba-Nadzo, and I'm the Programme Director for the Key Populations Programme at SESHA in Zimbabwe.
Excellent. So today we are chatting a little bit about some of the challenges that programme managers sometimes face with academics when we are managing implementation programmes. So just to get a bit of a background on both of us, Primrose, do you want to just introduce briefly what your role is?
So I oversee the implementation of the Sex Work Programme, and that's a national programme under the Ministry of Health. And we run out of 57 clinic sites nationwide, and we serve with a comprehensive sexual and reproductive health program for sex workers that we reach about between 26 and 28,000 sex workers each year.
Okay, excellent. And so I, as a program manager, I manage a research program that is essentially evaluating some of the work that that's Primrose has just mentioned there. So really probably to kind of start with to say is that, you know, both myself and Primrose, when we've been discussing this, you know, we get on very well with the academics in our lives, and we have really good working relationships with them. But there is a balance to be struck around, you know, the breadth and depth of the research kind of versus the milestones of a program and things that have to be done, and some of the, you know, the requirements that we have of, say, of some of our funders. Is that fair? Would you agree with that, Primrose?
Definitely, I agree. From the program management side, although we're valuing the academics and the research, my focus is always, we have a project to implement. We've agreed on what we will do, within what timeframes, how we're going to track our performance, and we want to get the job done, and we want to get it done as quickly as possible and as well as possible, and that's what we're interested in. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess really it is, it's really up to the kind of the program manager and the researcher to work together to demonstrate the, you know, what the research is telling us, but also how it can improve our existing, but also our future programs.
Yeah, it really is. We need to demonstrate that there's value in the research that gets done, because always from the program, we want evidence to base our adaptations and innovations in the work on. But we also have undertakings we have to stakeholders, to donors, that we need to strike that difficult balance. We can't miss certain scale-up timelines waiting for the research to be completed, even though the findings from the research are important. And in terms of the sex work program, the way we've always scaled up since its inception in 2009 has been based on what the research tells us about what works and what doesn't. And that helps that we no longer have this one-size-fits-all model of the sex work program. We've got adaptations and modifications that we've made based on the research. Recently, there was some work on micro-planning and self-help groups that were piloted in Harare. That's helped inform how we're now implementing that at more remote sites where it would be difficult to do without the knowledge of what works well that we have now.
Yeah, and that's a really nice way to end this very kind of short podcast is, you know, when the implementation and the research comes together and really improves the programs that we're working on.
Yeah, that works well when they can meet together without too much friction. That definitely works well.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. That was just a short insight into the day-to-day challenges, but also the great outcomes that we have in our programs as well. Thanks, Purpose.
Bye.
Global Health Research Challenges. Greetings to the panel members and all present at the 2020 GLOW Conference. It is my pleasure and honor to contribute to this session on global health research. Global Health needs a working group of international organizations. This brings along like-minded people to discuss their work, learn from others, and forge new partnerships, resulting in fruitful collaborations as evident from publications with multiple international authorship. What is the basis for a successful collaboration? I think the key is the research question. The research question should have a local importance. It should be a priority for the people, the providers, and the policy makers. Besides, it should also be globally relevant. Where there are questions about the quality of care, women's satisfaction with the care, and the needs from the women's point of view, we need to overcome cultural and language barriers. Understanding the nuances of the spoken word is important. Interpretation of such study results should be done carefully. The most challenging aspect of international collaboration is the approval process. This goes through bureaucratic and regulatory processes. This is time-consuming and demanding. It is helpful to know the requirements of all the regulatory bodies. Communication, sharing of files, and data management is not difficult. In fact, the ease of multiple communication and data sharing options has brought down the barriers of time and distance. In my experience, political ideologies and cultural diversity has never been a barrier. Team diversity has been found to improve the quality of the work. New ideas come when you interact with people from diverse backgrounds. You think about things in a different way. You live in a global world where we want to be able to think more broadly. We can't do that without international collaboration. Wishing you all good health. Thank you.
My name is Lucy Nyaga. I am the country director, Liverpool School for Tropical Medicine in Kenya. I am going to speak about implementing research from a program management perspective. I will specifically focus on conducting COVID-19 research within the context of a maternal and newborn program Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine is implementing in Kenya. Recognizing that COVID-19 will impact on overall program management and its outcomes, we appreciated the fact that the actual impact of COVID-19 on maternal and newborn health outcomes can be most objectively determined through conducting research. We therefore mobilize program stakeholders, including our donor, DFID, the Ministry of Health, both at national and subnational level. We also mobilized health workers in the facilities around the country and other maternal and newborn health partners working around the country. This was with the aim of getting their buy-in for the research And the research is basically to determine the impact of COVID-19 on maternal and newborn health outcomes in Kenya. However, along the way, we have had to deal with a myriad of issues, including realigning program work plan and resources to accommodate the research, coordination of stakeholders, ethical approvals, among other factors. Based on the above, and from a program management perspective, we have learned the need for flexibility and the need to provide contingencies for aspects that were not originally foreseen during program design stage.
Hi, my name is Eunice Ngonda, the Finance Manager of LSTM Nairobi office, and sharing from my financial management perspective the challenges that I experience when it comes to implementing research in this local context is really helping the team understand that their budget and a budget that has limits to that fact. And this is a challenge that presents itself in various scenarios almost every other day, and is helping the team understand that discussions sometimes have to happen, approval levels have to be observed if the environment has changed and we have to adjust the program in a certain manner, and also creating an environment for the team to be able to even come up with solutions themselves that can allow the program objectives to be fulfilled, to fit within the environment that is changing, but still fitting within the budget limits. I mean, looking at the scenario that has presented itself in the whole world, and that is COVID-19. This is a pandemic that no one had seen, but saying that we can be able to change from face-to-face trainings to virtual meetings, supporting the participants with airtime, I mean, that was a good way of really adjusting, but still observing the budget limitations. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm James Ditai, a full-time off-site PhD student at the University of Liverpool, but based in Uganda. I have had interesting challenges in my PhD journey, but I will speak only about two. That is delays from ethics approvals in Uganda and impact of COVID-19 restrictions on my studies. This is my story. In November 2017, I registered for a full-time off-site PhD fellowship in women's health at the University of Liverpool. Towards the end of my first year, I submitted my application to Makerere University Research Ethics Committee in Uganda for ethics review and clearance. It took exactly 5 months for the REC to invite me for oral presentation, even after constant follow-up. At this point, I was away for the annual on-site visit at the University of Liverpool. A virtual meeting via Zoom was arranged, but this did not work out well with the ethics committee due to poor internet connectivity in their meeting room. A month later, I returned to Uganda to follow up the REC application in person. There was no form of feedback for me, even after 3 proper months after the REC meeting. How I overcame this ethics hurdle was I simply submitted the same application to another REC. And within a rapid turnaround time of 4 months, I had all full ethics and regulatory approvals in the country. That means I had permission to start data collection for all my 3 separate PhD studies on the Ugandan land. However, it turned out that all these studies could never start without the sponsorship permission to proceed. In this case, from the University of Liverpool. I waited for another 5 months passed by before I was offered sponsorship permission to proceed for the first 2 studies at the end of my second year. For the 3rd study, I'm still waiting for the sponsor's permission. With joy, I launched the first study within the first 1 month of my year 3. In my 3rd month of year 3, I launched the initial survey of the first study, a listing what questions matters to the lay public regarding pregnancy, childbirth, and newborn health in rural Uganda. But in the 5th month of my year 3, specifically on the 21st March 2020, I suddenly stopped all the recruitment due to the country's total lockdown following the COVID-19 pandemic in Uganda. After 1 month into the total lockdown, it was lifted to a partial lockdown, but with no permission to conduct research involving face-to-face interaction with human subjects. At this time, I desperately needed to complete recruitment in this phase of the study. What did I do? At exactly 1.5 months into COVID, I initiated a phone call-based informed consent process. I called the potential participants via phones, audio recording the informed consent process, and all those who accepted to participate in the study were recruited up to end. I also prepared and submitted 2 manuscripts for publication as study protocols. I started to collate and analyze the initial survey data in preparation for the steering group meeting, which has not yet occurred. So my story provides true life story for any full-time student whose research might only start in year 3 of the PhD journey. It also proposes a model for informed consent during COVID-19 or future pandemic that call for restrictions of no face-to-face interaction with human subjects.
Thank you. So we heard from very many different people there about their own perspectives on the challenges in real-world research, varying from keeping within the budget to satisfying the funders and many other aspects besides. So I'm just going to turn to Charles and Helen and Joe now and ask you a few questions, and we'll have a discussion about this. Maybe you've all done a lot of research over quite a number of years. What would you say were the greatest real challenges that you faced in doing your research? Perhaps we'll start with Helen.
Yeah, I think first of all, I think doing global health research it's been extremely enjoyable. The journey, I think, has been very rewarding. But as you say, there are challenges along the way. And probably I'll start with the first presentation that we heard about the participants' empowerment. Certainly, when I ventured into research, both in Kenya and the Gambia, when I started out over 10 years ago, I think one of the key challenges was, trying to see how, especially women in rural communities, to what extent do they actually understand the research information that we are giving them, because they're already so disempowered. And obviously that kind of like the power dynamics there between the researcher, and even when you have your field team there, sometimes there's still the power dynamics, because your research team will probably be a lot more educated than the participants who like to recruit and study within your research. So I guess it's, for me, one of the really, really important things is, I guess, the thing around community engagement. And that goes beyond just, telling the community about what you're going to do, but actually ensuring that you're tailoring your participant information sheet and the information that you're asking your team to deliver to the participants to a level that they can understand, to ensure that actually there's real buy-in into your research project, so that they feel there's some benefit from it. Sometimes there's not always that direct benefit, but I think it's ever so important that they feel part of it, and it's not just something that's brought to them, to be done to them. Yeah, I think that's, for me, is one of the key challenges. Mm-hmm.
Have you been able to bring back the results of your research to those communities when you finished?
Yes, so I think the opportunities are not always there, especially when you're a student and you're just there for a short period of time. But the opportunities that I've had to actually go back and rediscuss it with the community, it's been great. The question is always, okay, so then what happens next? So they're always very keen to continue engaging. But I think the key thing is how your starting point, how you actually introduce that project, you and your team, how you introduce yourselves to that community, and the way in which your work is conducted throughout the process. Yeah.
Joe, I know this is something that you've been feeling strongly about yourself, and the issue of equity in global health women's research. Would you like to address that point?
Yeah, I guess that, yes, we need to, when we design research studies, when we think about who we include as participants, who we include as the researchers. Am I repeating myself? Have you got an echo there from me?
No, you're fine.
Okay, all right, sorry, it's just my computer then, sorry. So I think, yeah, so equity is obviously very important, and it's part of who you include as participants, who you include as researchers, and ensuring that we do that, we've got equity in that, but equity in partnerships as well. So I think that's a key thing, is when we develop research studies, that we're doing it in sort of collaborative partnerships with different people, and that we're developing that research together. So whether that's including, the key beneficiaries of the research, so the women, the families that this research is supposed to support, including them in the kind of the development of the research, if at all possible. So, and also people like the policymakers and the practitioners, so the people who are going to use the findings of the research to change their practice or change policies, trying to include them in developing the research right from the word go, so that we're including that important element, so that when we do the research and we've got our findings, we're really excited about them, people will listen to that. They'll take, as being part of that research, they're more likely to listen to those findings and actually use them, really. So that's my point there. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Charles, what do you think about how we can improve equity in our global research?
Thank you for that very good question. And I really like all the testimonies that came from all the previous speakers. It is very important to think about equity right from the time you design the study. Gender equity, the involvement of local institutions, institutions in the global south, and researchers from those institutions, within those studies. It is important to think about this upfront. Even before you start data collection, think about the research outputs. There are going to be X number of publications, who is first author, who is last author, and having all the various partner institutions amply represented. This is quite important. You don't want to get to the end of the line and then, there's a squabble for who's been listed on the paper or not. And at times it happens where, you take things for granted. You overplay your positionality as coming from the north, you feel quite important and superior to the rest of the team. You go ahead and submit a publication with or without their names, and then it throws up a huge disagreement in that relationship. So this is quite very important. Some partners, they may not be researchers, but they're part of that implementation process, maybe sitting at the technical level, at the Ministry of Health level, but they're also interested. They have been part of the process, and they're also interested in the research output. But you've involved them in everything, in design, in dissemination, meetings, and all of that. But then you produce an academic output, and there's no discussion with them, and you exclude them. Typically, it will backfire. So there needs to be that open and transparent discussion. There needs to be the need to make sure there's gender balance, to have ample representation of all the partners and the outputs of that research.
Thank you. So yeah, great to be as inclusive as possible throughout the whole, from start to finish of the process. Perhaps just going back to the start of the process and about who chooses the research questions in the first place, and how do we know that the research questions that we might have in our minds are going to be of benefit to the people in the countries where we're working? I don't know, Helen, if you've got any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we've talked about building capacity, so, you know, I'm from Sub-Saharan Africa, so it's about building capacity in Sub-Saharan Africa. And, you know, at the moment, there are very many active researchers in Sub-Saharan Africa. And sometimes I guess one of the greatest challenges is trying to access funding to do their research. I think Professor Weiswa has just mentioned that in the previous session, that sometimes they have the research questions, but there isn't the funding there to actually do the research. So I guess in terms of developing the research questions, I think, you know, certainly there's the need for partnership, because I think partnerships that are mutually beneficial. And, you know, as we were discussing yesterday, when Professor Sally Theobald said, the people who actually live and work in those environments, they know what the real need is. And sometimes all they need is just to kind of like revise and refine the research questions so that, you know, they can be, you know, they can put it, you can, you know, develop a really strong research proposal through that. But, you know, I think it's very much, you know, I personally feel it's very much an issue of let people in the Global South, where the needs are, come up with the initial research questions, and then maybe we can co-develop them and support them.
Thank you. I remember thinking back to when I was a medical student, we didn't get really taught very much about research methods from the point of view of being young researchers at all. And I think that perhaps is still an issue sometimes in many places. Charles, I wondered if you'd like to address this question about real capacity building for young researchers, and even starting from the student level upwards in the global context.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, in my experience, there are opportunities for building capacity of colleagues, junior, less experienced researchers in the Global South, that comes through the various grant applications. In fact, it is mandatory in some of those applications that you put in a plan for capacity strengthening. And there lies the opportunity, working with other senior members of that institution, I mean, to identify, the research needs of that team, and having a transparent process to actually identify, those team members that will benefit from those, capacity strengthening initiatives. But then as well, incorporating capacity building to keep such process going even after the project. So building that capacity within the senior faculty members in that institution to continue rolling it out as part of a program, and then you have a real sustainable approach.
Thank you. Thank you. Joe, I wonder if I can bring, is Joe still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Hi. Joe, I've just had a question come in that's really interesting. I'll read it out to you. It's about the COVID research. It says, do you personally feel that this challenging of resources and funding on COVID-related research risks overlooking other research strains and projects now and in the future? And do you think that researchers should raise attention on this issue? I've just had a question come in that's really interesting. I'll read it out to you. It's about the... Do you hear me, Joe? COVID research. It says, do you personally feel that this challenging of resources and funding on COVID-related research... Did you hear the question, Joe? Sorry.
I heard a bit of it, and then I had a repeat of it.
Oh, sorry. So it's really about the, research funds being channeled into COVID research, and is this detrimental to the other research strands that are very important still? And And are we going to overlook other things that are important in research because of this overwhelming tide of COVID research? And how should we, and perhaps not just COVID, but other things that are kind of the mood of the moment, and how do we maintain our priorities in the things that matter and take on board these new challenges at the same time?
Yes, I agree with the statement that, you know, there is a huge sway of funding going towards COVID-19 research, which, you know, some of it is obviously very necessary and very important. But obviously there is a finite pot of money for research, so other areas are going to be neglected because of that. And of course, those things aren't going away, are they? So maternal mortality, morbidity, neonatal mortality and morbidity aren't going. They're probably increasing as we speak because of the access and utilization of services. So yeah, I think there's a real challenge and a real problem. And it's not just in research, but it's in service delivery as well, and provision of all sorts of services. So I think we do need to take a step back. I think there is something, you know, about COVID-19, about its being a shock to health systems, and the research that we can do about that can maybe help us be able to manage future shocks on health systems, whether they're another pandemic or whether they're an earthquake or whether they're a conflict or other shocks as well. So I think there's an opportunity to learn from the COVID-19 research for other shocks and ways of making health systems resilient to be able to manage those shocks in the future. So I think that, you know, we need to look at it like that because as well, but at the same time, I think we still need to do the research on other areas that are important and relevant to different countries and different contexts across the globe. Thanks.
Thank you. Charles, I've watched you over the last several years balancing all the tensions between funders, deliverables, research questions, ministries of health and so on. Perhaps you could address that issue that Eunice alluded to in the film as well, a bit about the challenge between the funding and making sure that we keep to timescales when we meet challenges like James spoke about the delays with ethics and so on.
Yes, so I think it's a delicate, fine balancing act, you know, dealing with all these key stakeholders. You know, you've applied for a grant, you've got a grant from the funder. Maybe when you were developing that proposal, the lead stakeholder in the Ministry of Health was different from the person who's there now after you've got the grant. So there's already, you know, a different understanding of what this is going to be all about. It probably has come with a different understanding of what these funds can be used for and what they cannot be used for. So there's that tension every time to be really clear. So you need to be clear, transparent upfront to say, you know, what these funds are used for and what they cannot be used for, and what is the role of the partner as the Ministry of Health in doing this. And, you know, there's a similar tension as well with funders, you know. So I've had experience, you know, with a major donor where the, you know, the officer who was looking after this program had to leave and somebody else took over this program. And, you know, the person who is taking over, you know, wants things to be done slightly differently from what was, what had been agreed, up to the point of almost going back to, you know, taking out some big chunks of the proposal and putting something else. And you wonder, is this not the same institution we're dealing with here? So it can be very frustrating. But I think, you know, really remaining calm, you know, deliberate and clear, you know, in what you're doing, you know, documenting these things, because then you will have, you know, what to be able to show. For partners like Ministry of Health, you know, they really want to see what is the impact for our community, for the Ministry of Health. And so they need to be, you know, a part of that process. And once they begin to see the product, as it were, you know, they sort of value it the more, and those tensions sort of, you know, cease. So I think very good communication, It's very important with all. Documenting things, be quite clear, in terms of what you want to do. And, if something goes wrong with the funder, you're quite clear, well, this has gone wrong, but this is what we've learned, and this is what we are proposing. So you need to go with a problem as well with a solution that is logical. And, typically, you can make progress.
Thank you. Helen, have you got anything to add to that?
No, I think it's, going back to one of the presentations, the fact about empowering the teams that you're working with. So I guess they're often, especially if you're a researcher here, based here in the UK, and you've got a team who are really supporting you to, undertake this research project and deliver on the various deliverables. It's empowering them to find solutions, and they will. And I guess, sometimes when you have a very paternalistic approach in terms of how you want your research to be conducted, because obviously often the funding will come from the West, then it becomes more difficult for teams to learn, to grow through that process. And I guess when we're talking about capacity building, it's building capacity in terms of allowing people to grow through those processes so that for the next research project that they're involved in, they're probably going to be taken on at a more senior level, and eventually they'll actually be able to work and develop their own research questions or manage their own projects. So I think it's really going back to the issue of equity and just ensuring that actually we're being very open and transparent about that process.
Thank you. So I'd just like to ask you all a question that's perhaps a little bit more personal in terms of your own research journey. I'm sure we've got quite a number of people listening who are early stage researchers, and maybe Joe, I could ask you to talk us through and think about your younger self when you were starting out as a researcher. What advice would you give yourself with hindsight now in terms of if you were starting out all over again as a new researcher in women's health?
So I'm just thinking about my first research project that I did in China on maternal health and postnatal practices in the postnatal period, so sort of traditional practices. So it was for my master's study. It was the first ever piece of research that I ever did. And I was so enthusiastic and so driven by that I kind of steamrollered my way over everybody I saw, really. And I'd say that that's not a good way to do it at all. I think it's understanding the context in which you're doing the research, respecting differences, different ways of working, different ways of seeing the world, different ways of doing things, and trying to sort of work collaboratively to do it. I mean, I think I got to the end of that research project and I was much better at it, but I kind of, had made all those sort of mistakes there. And I think, now looking back at it, I think, yeah, Joe, you were too sort of hardworking in a way. And that's a bit of a strange thing to say when you're doing research, because research is hard work and you have to be diligent and rigorous, etc. But there's a balance with that, a balance about communicating with people, balance of the amount of work you expect from other people within the research team, understanding the incentives, what motivates people to be part of research, and understanding that so that you can really get, work well together and get the best out of it, really. So I think that for me has stayed very firmly in my head when I've moved forward, when I've been developing research programs since then, and more about the, developing equitable partnerships. I can talk about now recently in the last year, I'm leading a research program on health systems in fragile and shock-prone settings. And one of the first exercises that we've done as a consortium, so this is about 8 different partners, is really about our values as a partnership. What are our values? And it's a good place to start, because that's where you sort of try to understand what is it that make people work in research? How do we want this partnership to work? What's important to all of us? And things that we did in that exercise and things that came up were about open communication, respecting differences, trust in terms of budget, in terms of publications, Charles, all these different things. That are important and will be different across the partnership. So it's having that open and transparent conversation about that and trying to work together according to those values. Thanks.
Thank you, Jo. So Helen, what advice would you give to your younger self as a starting out researcher?
Yeah, I think, so I think my journey's been a little bit different. So I've had, experience of being an academic here in the UK, and in Sub-Saharan Africa as well. And I guess one of the key things is just not, I'm here because I haven't given up, but it's really understanding that actually sometimes those moments when you don't succeed in what you expect you'll succeed in are actually moments where it gives you time to grow, to learn new things, and it's an opportunity as opposed to a setback. So I think for me, in terms of giving myself advice, I would say when you get a no, when you get a rejection, it's an opportunity to go back and learn, regroup, and that the next time it will be better and you'll be in a better position to actually get something that would be right for you. So it's just really keeping going. You need a lot of resilience to remain in research, but also just ensure that you really value yourself as a person and that those rejections don't set you back.
Fantastic. And Charles, what would you say to that question?
Yes, I know they've both said a lot, but I mean, if I look back at my younger self in research, what I would have liked to have was a very good mentor, a very good sounding board, somebody who can help me to think and sort of map out my path, identify, those areas I want to grow it, we strategize, how I can get them, who I need to network with to be able to get those skills, and then, develop it in a more, structured way. But somehow we managed to do it the very hard way, which, for people who are new, I think first, identify that mentor. That mentor who doesn't have, probably line management responsibilities over you, where you can really guide your career path to exactly help you think through, those areas that you need to grow in, how you need to build it, and who you need to work with to be able to develop those ones. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're just coming to the end of this session now. We've had a final question about teaching medical students about research methods and critical appraisal, and should we make this compulsory in the curriculum? Personally, I think yes, because the more we learn about evidence-based medicine from an early stage, the better. I don't have time to ask everybody else for that take on that question now, but thank you very much for joining this session, and I hope you found it interesting. We're just going to have a couple of minutes break, and then we're going to have our final session, which is all about how to run an online conference. Our experience of learning very much on the hoof, how to translate a conference that has always been a face-to-face conference within the United Kingdom to this amazing global event where we've had more than 1,300 people from 69 countries joining us. So I'm just going to call upon another panel now to come and take over and in a few minutes' time explain how they've managed to pull it off. And I think everybody's done it really well, but I'll leave that for the panel to address in a few minutes' time. So thank you.
Played water fights, stayed up at night and dreamed of ways to rule the world. I still remember the first time I kissed you. The look on your face as I grazed your lips with my lips. Our worlds collided. Those were the days when everything was possible. Our dreams were alive. We had a fire inside. Those were the days. Those were the days. I'll always remember that cold night you told me we're not two, but we're gonna be three. In 8 months we'll be a family. Those were the days when everything was possible. Our dreams were alive. We had a fire inside. Those were the days. Right from the beginning, I knew that I loved you. Girl, we've got something amazing. It's just me and you, still so much to do. Right from the beginning, I knew that I loved you. Girl, we've got something amazing. It's just me and you, still so much to do. We've been together for as long as I can remember. We have history, made memories. I choose you and me, baby. These are the days, and everything's still possible. Our dreams are alive. We've got that fire inside. These are the days. These are the days.
So, welcome back to the final session of GLOW 2020 that we've been running over the last 2 days. My name's Andrew Weeks. I'm a Professor of International Maternal Health here at University of Liverpool, and I've been Chair of the Local Planning Committee. So, as you know, we've had to convert fairly rapidly to an online format, and we thought that to finish off the programme today, you might find it interesting to hear about some of the mechanics that have gone on behind the scenes. There's a lot of people who are planning conferences. I was planned to go to many conferences this autumn, and they've all been abandoned. Some have converted to an online format, some have not, some have continued and postponed. And so we thought it might be interesting to show you a little bit about what goes on behind the scenes so we can share some of our experiences with you. So to do that, I've got Matt Sales with me, who led the production team here. He's lead project manager at SFL Events Production Team. I've also got online, I hope, Chris Woodhouse. Now, Chris Woodhouse is an IT expert who facilitates another online, hello Chris, who facilitates another online maternity conference, which is the Virtual International Day of the Midwife. And that's been running since 2009, so it's a well-established conference, and they run a 24-hour online conference format using a slightly different system. And so we thought it'd be interesting to share with Chris and to hear about what he does. Then also we've got Milton Musaba, Milton Musaba is an obstetrician gynecologist in Mbale in Uganda. He's a clinical academic, currently doing a PhD with Bergen University in Norway on the use of bicarbonate to reduce acidosis in women in obstructed labour, and has just completed a huge randomised trial there. So he's senior lecturer in obstetrics and gynecology at Busutema, and welcome to you, Milton. Thank you for joining us to give the perspective of somebody who we were sort of hoping to reach. We were hoping that by doing this online format, we could perhaps reach parts that other conferences cannot reach. So let's call on Matt first of all. Matt, I wonder if you can take us through some of the mechanics of running an online conference. What's happened over the last few days? And can I ask you online, those of you listening, whilst he talks, can you text in your experience? Now, there'll be a formal evaluation that comes out, and so that'll be a little bit separate. But tell us, what's been good? What have you liked about it? What hasn't worked? What would you change in the future? Add it to the screen, and then we'll come to that as we go through the conference. As we go through the final bit. There should be, if I'm right, either up there a place where you can write your comments, or it might be down there. But write in your comments so we can have a look as we go along. So, Matt, over to you first.
Thank you, Andrew. I'd like to start by thinking, why do we even come to a conference? I don't know about you, maybe you're here to learn something. Maybe you're here to hear some amazing speakers or some fellow researchers. Maybe you're here to meet people, or maybe your employer or employing organisation has paid you and told you to come. But we're here and we go to conferences. So this was planned. The team here were planning to do a great conference, now obviously live in Liverpool, but of course COVID came and that's not to be. So I met the team, Andrew and the rest of the planning group here, in about March on Zoom. This week was the first time we'd met in person due to lockdown and other things. So we met in March and started to think, what are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to do? And therefore, what's the mission we're trying to, and the message we're trying to share? So we started looking at people from all around the world. Actually, if you were coming right now to Liverpool, you'd need to travel, pay for a hotel, food, car parking, childcare, all these things. But actually, by being online, this has now got a global reach. As we've heard all day, there's over 1,300 people registered, 69 countries, and we've got a little map here just to show countries all around the world that people have come from. And it's amazing to see the reach that we've been able to get, that most people, probably you wouldn't have flown here. But not even people watching. I think the wider, having watched the Wendy Graham panel a couple of hours ago, the reach of the clinical care that we've been able to, the speciality, the speakers who can come here, who we wouldn't have been able to have, because the budget wouldn't have stretched to flying all of these people. So the ability to get great content and speakers and people to connect with who are doing very similar projects anywhere around the world. So that's where we started, is what do we want to achieve? And Andrew and the team have a great start. So we looked at the programme, and one of the key messages that I was sharing at the start is digital minutes aren't the same as real minutes. And that was one of our real focuses. You can't just sit and think, I'm going to do an hour keynote, I'm going to do this. Because actually, when I'm sat in my office at home watching the stream, there's too many distractions. I might get up and make a cup of tea. I do all these things, my emails come in. In a conference room, most people sit there politely and watch the session. So you're actually limited on how long the sessions can be. So we've tried to break sessions up with videos, to put breaks in, and maybe some of them feel a bit unnatural, but it gives people a chance to read your emails and do other things, to then come back to the session and then really engage during the content. Because it's all about the engagement, asking the Q&A questions, writing in the chat, looking at some of the polling. How do we really go, actually, if I'm here when this starts at 11, I get to ask this person speaking, maybe it was Annie Portillo yesterday, or Wendy today, or many of the other speakers, questions around actually, oh, you care about my question, and now you're talking to me. And that's really one of the focuses we've really pushed for. So what have we done here? We've come to Liverpool and we've taken some lovely meeting rooms in this space, and we've built a couple of mini studio spaces. Again, none of this is particularly challenging, some small camera setups, lighting. It looks a little set just to make it as beautiful as we can for the stream. Again, nothing too difficult. And then we rely on something that is very unreliable called the internet. And that's the factor we can't control. What's coming into here, in the building here, is fantastic internet. It's very fast. We've not had any dropout at all here. But around the rest of the world is hard to tell. Some of our friends who've been speaking from Uganda and India and other places, it's like you're on the end of a piece of string. And unfortunately, that's out of our control. So we need to think a lot about that as we're planning this event. A lot of the main sessions, there's been some pre-recorded bits. Kathy, this morning, we just wanted to make sure, are we going to get every word? Because Kathy's presentation was amazing. We want to hear everything of it. So let's take a pre-recorded video to make sure we can get all of it. But as you saw, we've tried to take questions, the Q&A, wherever possible, live. And yes, maybe it's dropped out a few words, but that's mainly been out of our control. That is the power of the internet. So the key thing is internet, and then where can people watch it from? But also one of the other challenges, different countries have different internet rules. If there are people trying to watch from parts of Asia, maybe actually your internet there won't let you watch certain websites. So there's lots of things. So generally here, we've got a team. We've got the team with the videos and the PowerPoint, the camera team and the sound team, and they've been putting this together in a stream, working with the teams. And yes, we've had some challenges. Yes, yesterday we couldn't get Annie for a bit, so we moved the program around. But we have to be nimble and flex and go, okay, we're going to move the program. But Annie's like, but if you would go now and look at any of yesterday's sessions, they're there available for you, and they're there for the next 12 months for you to watch. So the chance to do that, to scan the, whatever, 150 posters and look at the abstracts and actually understand what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting talking with Annie yesterday. Annie Portela was one of our keynote speakers yesterday morning. And interesting, we'd checked the link, and then actually she moved place and went to what seemed to be a brilliant Wi-Fi link place at WHO. But there seemed to be some kind of a firewall which we couldn't get round.
We've tested every speaker we can, but of course, these things are always going to change. Things are going to change differently. Yep. People have moved locations. Some of the talks today, someone was sitting in a room where the sunlight's changed, so she looks different in the thing. And we can only plan so much of this. But also, we're in a world where we've watched TV with Zoom lately. We've been watching Have I Got News for You, or the briefings for COVID. They've all had Zoom or web-based platforms. So everybody's used to this. Yes, some of the panellists have been breaking up, but we're getting more used to that.
And what's interesting is that with 1,300 people registered, actually, when you're looking at who's watching live, actually there's a difference, isn't there? There's been about 100 people watching live at any one time, but when you look back on yesterday's videos, there's been about 1,000 people who have viewed them. So it's interesting, isn't it? And I would be fascinated to go behind that camera there and go into people's living rooms and say, now, what are they doing? Are they checking their emails? Are they working and it's just up in the background? Because I suspect most of us, when we're doing conferences from home, aren't just sitting there and watching. You think, oh, well, I'll take the opportunity just to do this and checking what else is going on. And so you don't get that same full attention, do you?
But I think it's the same at home. I don't watch live TV very much. Most of the time, you sit and you pick something up on Netflix or you watch something on iPlayer or whichever platform. And so the culture that says we sit there and at a certain time we watch something, I don't think that's a real thing as much anymore.
No, indeed. Yeah. So I want to bring in Chris. Now, Chris Woodhouse, you've been running the virtual International Day of the Midwife now. I don't know how long the conference itself has been going on for over 10 years. But how do you do it? What tips would you have for us? Because you've been following this and sharing tips with us, and thank you very much for the input you've given us. How do you do it differently?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, very good connection, thanks.
Good. I think it's practice and giving yourselves plenty of preparation time. That's the key thing. So we're already just planning our first meeting for next May's conference. So that it's long lead times, plenty of time to practice, I think, is the main thing. And you need to think about contingencies for what could go wrong in an online environment. As Matt was just saying, all sorts of things can happen. You can have fractured connections. You can lose someone, as you lost a speaker yesterday. Our tip for that is we actually plan a number of backup presentations. So we have a small number of people who do a wonderful thing. They volunteer to write and prepare and practice a presentation, which they might not deliver. And they're ready on standby in case we can't get through.
Yeah. Well, I think some of our best presentations, actually, we tried, our plan was originally to have a backup video for everybody, especially for those from potentially difficult internet settings, which is why Kathy Burgoyne, who was phoning in from Uganda, sent us a video to start with. In fact, we thought that Geneva was going to be fine, didn't we? But it just shows you actually need to do it, because you're never quite sure what's going to disrupt the process and what's going to cause problems. It may be internet strength, and in other places it may be firewalls.
But I think that has quite an impact on the speaker, because if I was coming to present for a 45-minute keynote, do I really want to record it in advance and then present it again? And that's also a challenge. How do we make sure that we've got a decent backup, but actually maybe what's better is the backup? Did they present it better at the backup? And all of those kind of things. How do their slides work? It's quite challenging to some of the bigger speakers when they've got a longer period of time to make sure it's all ready to go.
But it's funny, because one of the beauties of a conference like this is that we've been able to get in. We've got a phrase in the UK which is boxing above your weight, and actually for a relatively small conference we've been able to get some of the top speakers in the world, and that's been fantastic. We've really enjoyed that opportunity. But actually, these are people who are going from conference to conference, from webinar to webinar, and everybody wants. I think of the two, Ambrose Talisuna and Raji Tajuddin, yesterday from high up in the Africa CDC and WHO, who we wouldn't normally be able to get to spend 2 or 3 days. Well, I mean, of course, the expense would be enormous to bring them over, but actually to be able to link in, but then to ask them to do a half an hour pre-recorded video is quite a big ask, because we're not quite used to doing that yet. There's a few of them, and they're not terribly easy to do.
But I think because people are not travelling right now, actually people have got time. So people are much more prepared to do things, because people still have great research to share.
Yeah.
So there is the whole world of research still to share. And as we move forwards, and we'll become into hybrid world at some point when the COVID starts to calm down a little bit. And as we move into hybrid, which means some people will be in the room, this is not going to change. We're not going to be in a place where we're going to fly everybody again, because the climate impact. As we move forward, for me, I want to think, what are we doing for my kids and my grandkids in the future to help with the environment? Or how does this fund itself? Because actually, we've not paid for speakers here in the same way that you would if we'd flown them and all these costs. So actually, the technology costs, it kind of levels itself out. And then other people, the different input, as you said, with the sponsors for this event. This means it's a free event, more people. I'm sure there are more people in parts of Uganda and India who wouldn't have watched this if they'd had to pay for it. And so being able to share some of this research is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. Let's hear from Milton Musaba. Milton, are you there in Mbale in Uganda? How easy has it been accessing this conference? Do you think you've been able to reach the parts that other conferences haven't reached?
The last 2 days have been a wonderful experience, especially with regards to the convenience associated with this kind of arrangement. I have not had any hassle of having to look for a visa, to look for funding, to go for the conference, and I can come in, participate in a session that I'm interested in, and then get out to continue with the rest of the work that I'm involved in. So the convenience has been a plus for me in this whole session. Of course, there are the challenges of internet here and there, but it seems to vary depending on where you are and what time of the day. But it's good enough. I particularly liked the pre-recorded video of Kathy. I think it was very clear and it was very innovative to have that pre-recorded. I'm sure she would have had the same clarity if she was doing it live.
I think that's true, and of course the pre-recorded does give you absolutely perfect quality, because we're doing it from here rather than taking the possibilities from of what it might be from Uganda. Milton, it'll be fascinating in time looking at the Google Analytics to see actually where we've done this or who we've been able to connect with. One of the things, when we first set out doing this, we thought, okay, well, let's a lot of people don't have laptops, but there is a lot of phone use in sub-Saharan Africa and in Southeast Asia and the Indian subcontinent. So actually getting it of quality on your phone is going to be really important. And we set out with that distinct aim of reaching people who wouldn't otherwise been able to. But maybe that was a little bit hopeful. Do you know of many people in Uganda, of your colleagues who have accessed it or been able to connect to it?
Yes, I have, in Mbale here, I've known about 6 or 7 people who have been attending this conference, especially down at Safri. And outside that, actually, I'm also connecting through my mobile phone. I'm using it to do that my computer. So it does work.
So sorry, Milton, I know that Apple phones aren't very common in Uganda, are they? Most people have Android, don't they, or Samsung, is that right?
Yes.
So you've all been... So many people have been using the Android app, is that right?
Yes, you're right, Android app.
So do you think it was worthwhile? I mean, it took quite a lot of extra difficulty actually producing it as an app for the phone. That wasn't the easiest thing that we did, and we were wondering actually maybe we shouldn't have done that after all. Do you think that was worth doing?
Yes, Andrew, the app came in very handy. The only challenge with the app that I noted, and I've heard this from other people, is that it was quite difficult to navigate through the app, especially moving the agenda, moving from one session to the other. But it did help a lot, and especially the way it was organized.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic.
Andrew, I love the way that Milton was just talking about 6 people that he knows of who were able to come to this just because it's online. They wouldn't have ever flown here and got visas to come because the hospital they're involved with wouldn't be able to fund that. And maybe one of them could come to a conference every 5 years, depending, or they'd wait for a speaker to come to a country somewhere near them. Yeah. But that's a way to share some of this research in a way that probably this research doesn't get shared.
Yeah. I'm just looking through some of the comments on, and actually this has been a nice part of this, is having the comments online and looking at what people are saying. I mean, it's interesting about the funding of it, because I guess that there's the virtual International Day of the Midwife is run by volunteers. And in a sense that had been the same for us, but I guess as a local planning team, we just didn't have the expertise, and actually we were worried that everything would go very pear-shaped if we tried it that way. And we were very lucky actually that we were going to originally have a company in to do the production of it. And what we did then after that, we realised that it was going to cost us around about £20,000, that sort of figure. And if we were going to do that, we were going to have to charge everybody to come. And that was the model we set out with. And we were very lucky that the MRC and the Wellcome Trust stepped in to say, OK, let's make this free for all the different people. And not only for those attending in live, those attending here and now, but actually to put it, and it's going to be available for the next year on the internet. So people would still need to register, but it means you can flick in at any point and then revisit all these old these presentations. After the year, we'll put it on a Glow YouTube channel. So I think that the thought was that actually this was worth investing in as an educational resource for the future. So we've talked about all the benefits that we've got. Matt, what would you improve next time? What do you think you've learned from this session over the last 2 days? And how do you think we would change it if we should improve it?
I think Chris mentions a very interesting point around how do we actually plan better in preparation of content. I think the hardest thing has actually been we have so many people submitting abstracts and posters, and because we're trying to get pre-recorded, but actually people's diaries are busy. So the planning of how do we get all the content in the right place at the right time, that's been a challenge. And I think there are some ways we can do that better. And we need to work on that kind of thing. But I don't think there's very much more we can do about some of the guest speakers or any of the connectivity. That's at the whim of the internet. But I think most of the rest of it, people are commenting. I've read some of the comments. Maybe the PowerPoints are a bit small. It's quite difficult. Some of the slides have got a lot of content on them. Some of them have got a lot of content, or the posters especially, because the poster, if we printed them, they're A1 posters. They'd be great. So trying to suddenly read an A1 poster, we're looking at something the size of this television that you want to try and look on your phone. And how do we get the quality, especially when people are sending them from the world in different ways? So we've had some struggles, and we're happy to admit that. But I think the ability of people to connect has been incredible.
Thank you. And Chris, from your perspective, you've been a sort of an end user as well, an expert end user, shall we say. How have things gone for you? What do you think, as an expert user, what would you advise us in the future?
I think the overall appearance is really smart and slick. I do like the general look and feel of it, but I think the app and the web platform both were a bit clunky to use. There were some teething errors, and some bits didn't point where they should have done, and some of the messaging didn't quite work. So although the general stuff is really nice and accessible, and it works really well for the way you've had a mix of presenters and presentation styles, I think a bit more time in specifying and planning the access methods would stand you in good stead.
Yeah. And I guess these are things which, once you've... This is our first time running it online, and with time we'll get quite used to it. And it was interesting because actually we only got access to the final website and apps a couple of days ago, and suddenly we didn't have. We were playing catch up, trying to get it all correct and prepared in time for the conference. And so, actually, had we been, I guess, 2 weeks ahead of that, something like that, then actually we would have had the time to sort out those glitches and to test it all and to retest it and test it. Whereas some of those glitches you see are probably relatively straightforward to sort out if we had time. And of course, we'll know better next year. Experience and retrospect is a wonderful thing, isn't it?
It certainly is.
And Milton, from your perspective in Uganda, if you were to change things next year, if you were to give us some advice for the future, what would you suggest?
Thank you. So one of the things that has been new in this kind of arrangement is that there are distractions from the daily routines that we are involved in, and the lack of networking. And I would suggest that probably in the future we could have some kind of maybe satellite mini conferences all over the place, where, for example, if we are in Mbale here or Uganda, to make it bigger, there would be a particular place where people from within Uganda who would wish to attend the GLOW conference can congregate somewhere, and they have a good internet link, and those who want to concentrate can sit there and attend the conference in one place, as opposed to having to jump off from your duty station to sneak into and listen to one thing and go away. It takes away the bit of networking and the distraction. Sometimes the schedule has changed and you're not aware.
Do you think that many people will go on to use this as a future resource? Can you see people, because presumably if you're I don't know, maybe on leave and you're in a place with poor connectivity, or the network's down regionally, which isn't unusual, presumably you may not be able to access it then, but do you think many people will go, okay, I know where there's good network, let me go and watch a particular lecture the day after tomorrow, I'll book myself in because I know that I can connect it. Do you think there'll be much of that, or will people move on? Because life is busy, isn't it? We don't always get the chance to do all the educational things that we'd like to.
I think that was, and moving forward, I think this is going to be the new normal, that most conferences are going to be online, but that is what many people have been doing around here. So, for example, if you're within Mbale here, each office has got a good internet connection. So people have actually been moving from place to place to find a good connection to be able to connect. So it is something that would help, I would imagine.
Well, one sort of plan we had, which actually we never put into, we never actually ran with, was to run like a sort of a mini conference in different places around the world, so that actually you'd sit with a screen similar to this sort of size, and you would then play it for the population who were there, and so that you would in real time, like a conference. And it would be exactly as it would be a real conference, but maybe some of the sessions which weren't relevant would be taken out, and you'd have local speakers. You could charge a small amount, which would pay for the television screen rental and for the IT and for the facilities and some food. Do you think that could work?
Yes, I think that is something that could work. And that's what I was trying to suggest by saying probably in the future having something like satellite mini conferences, they would promote networking and minimize on the number of distractions that our people are faced with.
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. I'm just having a look through to see what all the other comments are online. It's worth having a look through and going through it. I mean, people were saying that slides are difficult to read on their phone, and I accept that. It's very difficult I guess as somebody writing a poster, as Chris was saying, as Matt was saying earlier, it's very difficult to get a huge poster and shrink it down, and then to put it on a phone is extremely difficult. But it looks as if there's a lot of enthusiasm, at least for the idea of moving forward. Somebody said it's interesting that it's a women's research society, and actually all four panelists are women, are not women. None of us are women, and apologies for that. I don't know. I would have to look through and see what the mix is over the day. We've tried to be inclusive, but we'll add that into our review to try and make sure that the panels are more inclusive. So I think it's time for us to close. Let me move up to the lectern here, because we're coming now to the end of the conference. This has been rather a new GLOW. This has been a new way of doing it for us. We never attempted this before, and we wanted the focus on respectful care, which we've had all through the day, and I found it fascinating, and especially being able to get videos, and this has been a benefit of doing it virtually, I guess, is that people then are very used to taking videos on their phones, and that means you can really get stories right from places where stories from women and from researchers who aren't normally able to access a conference. So that's been really helpful to get those insights. We had the focus yesterday on implementation science, which for me was fascinating as somebody who's largely done randomized trials. And we've also had then the year of the nurse and the midwife running as a theme throughout. Now, as I said, in previous years, and we started in 2012, we've had about 100 UK academics and trainees attending, and it's cost us around £20,000 to run that, which we've raised through charging people. This time, as I think was said earlier, we've had over 1,300 people register and over 69 countries represented. Different people, as I say, seem to be accessing it in different ways. Some people watching it live, other people watching it in retrospect and out of order. And again, that has cost us about the same amount. So we'll be looking over the next few weeks at all the analytics of this. Where exactly did we reach? What areas did we get to? And I'm very grateful to the MRC and to the Wellcome Trust for helping us to make it free to all those attending today. It's going to be important to evaluate it, as I say, and we'll do that partly through the analytics. But actually, you may have noticed that on your screen, I think you'll find that it's over there somewhere down in the long drop-down list. There's a bit which says survey. And you may have wondered what that meant. And that actually is the post-conference evaluation. It opens, I think has just opened. It opened at 4:30, that's British summertime. And so if you click on that, it'll ask you a whole number of questions of what you thought about it. And please be honest, because it's only with your insights that we'll get a chance to improve it for next year. Once you've done that, your name will come through by email, and so your certificate of attendance will then magically appear with you sometime next week. But that does rely on you. You see, not everything's free. It does rely on you filling in that evaluation questionnaire. So please do that and give us some ideas. So what about next year? Well, next year's GLOW is going to be in Birmingham. We've got Professor Shakila Thangaratnam and Professor Ari Kumarasamy who are going to be hosting that conference. Shakila, I'm hoping, is with us. Shakila, are you there? Hello, good afternoon, Shakila.
Yes, I am very much, Andrew.
Welcome. Please continue.
Thank you very much. Firstly, huge congratulations to you and the team at Liverpool and everybody. It's been a fantastic conference. And I love the flexibility, and I'm sure many of us have enjoyed the flexibility of tuning in, out, pausing, going back. And in difficult circumstances, it's been a great job. So it's a tough act to follow. So the next one, as Andrew said, will be in Birmingham. And we are based at the WHO Collaborating Center for Global Women's Health there. Next slide, please. So on behalf of my colleague, Ari Kumarasamy, and myself and our team, we very much welcome you to join us next year. Next slide, please. So we never know how things are going to be. It's possible that we get to see quite a lot of you in person in our university. That's Old Joe, our clock tower in the background, enjoying trips by the canals in Birmingham. Next slide, please. The next slide, please. Yeah. Or we could still very much be where we are with the unknown, where travel could still be restricted. But going by what I've been hearing in the last session, I think there's a huge appetite now for continuing the remote access to such conferences. It increases our reach multiple times across multiple countries, in addition to the carbon footprint on the positive side. So we will work with Andrew and the team and the steering committee to get to look in detail about your feedback on how it works. Next slide, please. And see you soon in Birmingham. Stay safe and look forward to catching up in the near future.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shakila. And we do have a symbolic duty, if you'll help me with this, first of all, Shakila. We do, as you'll see, the GLOW logo is actually the candle of light of knowledge. And so I do have a formal duty through the power of the internet to pass this across to you. So if you would accept that, thank you very much. And hopefully, can you pick that up? There you go, fantastic. And look at that. And you've even been able to light it in the meantime. Isn't that wonderful?
Yes, I know, exactly. So the other miracles you can do online. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you very much, Shakila, and we'll see you all next year. Before we leave, we do have many thanks to pass on. I really do need to name all the Liverpool committee because they've been fantastic to work with. Mira Ebringer has been the person who's been up at all hours staffing the GLOW conference email address on Gmail. So thank you, Mira, for doing that and for doing a lot of the administration around the conference. Kate Lightley, Tista Day, Helen Allett, Charles Ame, Dot Lambert, Terry Kana, Tina Lavender and Helen Nabuera. This is bringing together University of Liverpool and Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine maternal health teams, and we'll look forward to many years of working together. But we also need to thank the SFL, the company who have helped us and have gone way beyond what I think they promised that they were going to do. They are the men in black who have been around us. So led by Matt, thank you so much, Matt, for all the work you've done and for guiding us through all this. Andrew Hardiman, Luke Parker, Andrew Lee, Hayden McLaughlin, Archie Horrocks and Dave Scarlett. You will get, if you're going to get a little bit sad because GLOW is finishing, we're looking to develop some GLOW seminars, and we're looking to run those every couple of months in a single session. And so if you're interested in that, we'll email you about it, and there's a space on the evaluation sheet for your comments as to what you would have. So have a safe trip home. Well, actually, WHO have asked me to give a special message because actually you may already be at home. And if you are at home, get up and do some exercise. Don't sit in front of your computer all day. Otherwise, you'll get a pandemic of thrombosis following on from this. So please get up and go. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next year.